Please remain seated. The show will begin in 3, 2...
Like a Hellcat.
Hi, I'm FandomTraveller87.
Want to hear a ghost story?
It was the beginning of June in the year of 2007, outside of the town of Shadow Haven. It was a 30-mile drive to Camp Carnegie that was located on Lake McGrimley. Clementine Susanna Colt, age 11, was sitting in the back passenger seat alongside her younger brother Luke, age 9, in their dad's old 1950s green Buick. Clementine had short auburn pixie-cut hair, wearing a blue and white Red Sox baseball cap, along with a black leather jacket, a white tank top with a gold heart-shaped pennant around her neck, torn blue jeans, and brown leather boots. The girl's freckled face scrunched up in annoyance as she silently scowled and rolled her eyes at her brother.
Aw, come on, Dad. It's my first time at camp with people my age. Do I seriously have to bring the baby with me? He's just gonna slow me down. And all he ever does is whine and cry all the time when he doesn't get his way. It's so embarrassing.
Now, kids, please listen to me, responded their father gently, who let out a heavy sigh and rubbed his temples tiresome. I work long hours at the gas station. I couldn't afford to pay a sitter right now, and your grandpa is doing everything he can to help me. He's had a massive turnover of employees lately, and I seem to be the only one available who can run the store. I could have gotten your mom to look after you kids, especially after, well, how things ended with the divorce. But she's in Las Vegas, and she's been dealing with a lot too, and she deserves a break. So I need you kids to please, for my sake, just try to get along. I think this will be the perfect opportunity for you two to start bonding. Don't you agree?
I wish. But I miss Mom. She doesn't really spend much time with us anymore.
Seriously, who cares, Clem? Replied Lucas snobbishly. Mom abandoned us. We're better off without her anyway.
Bite your tongue, maggot. Or I swear, I will.
That's enough, you two, barked their dad. We're almost there. Can you guys just give me the last 5 minutes of peace? That's all I ask. They eventually drove up to the dirt path, leading up to the entrance of Camp Carnegie. They then parked the car and exited the vehicle. There were several other kids, between the ages of 6 to 14, that were being dropped off by their parents and other relatives. Then a few teenage counselors greeted them warmly and started gathering their luggage and escorting them to their separate cabins. Their father opened the trunk to the Buick, then handing his children their sleeping bags, satchels with other supplies, including lanterns, an extra set of pillows and blankets, and giving Clementine her flip phone to contact him in case of an emergency. All right then, that settles it, replied their father sternly, as he gently closed the trunk of the Buick and turned to face his children with his hands on his hips. He stared deeply into their souls, as if to say, you better be good because I don't want to hear any complaints from the counselors about your behavior. That kind of expression. That one look of disapproval that most kids dread when they fear of getting in any sort of trouble. Do not fret, sir, exclaimed an old woman in a warm and bubbly tone of voice. She appeared to be in her mid-60s, briskly approaching them and shaking their father's hand. The older woman wore a red and yellow Camp Carnegie sweatshirt with a Dreamcatcher and Sparrow logo on it. She also had on a black skirt and purple flip-flops with her gray hair in a tight bun. I've been successfully running my business for the past 40 years, sir, said the woman proudly as she casually handed him the card to her office number. I assure you that I have very strict procedures set in place for safety protocols. Curfew is always at 8:30 sharp and never later. I appreciate that, Barbara, thank you, replied the father. Well, kids, I'd best be off now. Remember, be good, and if you need anything, you let me know.
Yes, Dad, thank you.
Their father kissed them on the heads and got back inside the Buick and then drove off, while also waving goodbye to them. Once he was out of sight, Barbara then cleared her throat and adjusted her spectacles, glancing back at the children with a rather Cheshire cat-like smile that was so noxious to Clementine, the girl actually grimaced a little. All right now, sweeties, I will personally escort you to your bunkmates at your designated cabins. Please follow me and do not dawdle. Chop, chop, come along. Carrying all their stuff, the children quickly followed the woman close behind, at her heels, as she directed them to their cabins. Clementine would be staying at cabin A7 with girls within her own age group, while her brother would be at cabin C12. I have other things I must attend to now, said Barbara more firmly, as she gave an icy cold glare at the children for just a split second. Do not give your counselors any sort of grief. I pay them enough as it is. I certainly wouldn't want to compensate them for their emotional distress. Barbara then spun on her heel and gave them a rather small shooing gesture. Off you go now. Off you go. Then Barbara left. Well, Luke said, she's charming, isn't she?
Yeah, like a shark with root canal surgery.
Clementine retorted as the children went their opposite ways. A delicious meal was scheduled to be prepared that evening to serve to the children, roughly 5 o'clock that evening. Hamburgers, fries, chocolate shakes, tapioca pudding, steamed vegetables, mashed potatoes, apple slices, etc. Clementine was sitting by herself at a table closest to the window on the very far end of the mess hall. Oh, look who it is, ladies. It's the freak, chimed a familiar voice.
Oh no, this is not happening,
Responded Clementine with a groan. Clementine did the best that she could to avoid any sort of social interaction with Darcy Mitchell, who was her arch nemesis, and they both attended the same classes together back in Shadowhaven. Clementine ducked her head down and buried her face in her baseball cap, not wanting to be seen, but it was too late. Darcy lightly tapped Clementine on the shoulder and then quickly snatched the baseball cap off of Clementine's head before tossing it in the garbage beside her. Clementine took a deep breath and exhaled calmly. She then slowly rose up from her seat and then walked over to the trash can without giving eye contact to Darcy and her friends, then reaching in with her left hand and taking out her baseball cap. Fortunately, the hat wasn't ruined. There was no food on it. All she had to do was just dust it off a little bit. Then Clementine, while staring deeply into Darcy's eyes, bravely puts the baseball cap back on her head.
What's your damage, Mitchell?
Clementine demanded. Well, someone's a bit touchy tonight, aren't they? Said Darcy nonchalantly in a condescending way. I'm just surprised that your deadbeat daddy even had the money this time to afford membership for you and your stupid brother.
Why don't you just leave us alone, Darcy? I never did anything to you.
Darcy Mitchell gave Clementine a rough shove, and Clementine let out a small gasp, startled as she stumbled back and nearly hit her head against the wall. It definitely turned some heads, and there were mixed expressions. Some were encouraging this sort of scenario, while a few were just bewildered at the sight. "The bottom line is, Clemmy," said Darcy venomously, as she stared down at Clementine at eye level, "your deadbeat daddy and your senile grandpa simply can't afford to pay the rent of their run-down, smelly gas station, in which my father was so generous enough to give you guys an extension so that you guys could pay him back. But no. You are all so incompetent. You don't know how to manage anything. All I have to do is just influence my daddy's decision. He pays quite a contribution to funding this camp. And did you know that him and the owner are good friends?"
Okay, Darcy, so what? What does that have to do with me?
"Oh, I'm so glad you asked, Clemmy. Why, as a matter of fact, Miss Barbara made me her honorary assistant in enforcing the rules of this camp, and should you step out of line just even once, I can get you kicked out of here, and all of you are gonna wind up on the street homeless. How does that sound?" Clementine is fuming. Her left eye twitches, and she clenches both her fists, ready to sock Darcy in the face, but her brother Luke holds her back. "Don't do anything stupid," whispered her brother. "Darcy's not worth it." "Aw, isn't that just precious, everyone? Clemmy's baby brother's actually trying to be the hero. How cute." Darcy let out a playful yawn out of sheer boredom, checking her reflection in her handheld mirror before averting her eyes back at her friends. This is no fun, ladies. Let's just head back to our table." One of Darcy Mitchell's friends, Brandy Evans, a dark-skinned girl with blonde, bob-cut hair and brown eyes, gave a sort of hand gesture which would be a direct insult to just anyone, giving Clementine the L symbol while placing her left hand on her forehead, before giving a rather taunting wave and following behind Darcy. Darcy's other friend, Audrey Rodriguez, timidly looked over at Clementine with a sheepish shrug, giving a silent, rather apologetic look, before timidly following Brandy and Darcy back to their table, mouthing, "And I am so sorry." A little time had passed. Clementine had just left one of the public showers, wearing her purple bathing suit that had daisies on it, and she was carrying her satchel with her spare clothes in it. Walking along the rocky shore, she went all the way to the loading dock and sat down, sticking her feet in the water as she took her sandals off. The full moon had shone over the mountains, and it was definitely a crisp, cool night, rather comfortable and serene. Clementine decided that she would just swim a couple laps in the shallow part of the lake. She'd be closer to the shoreline in case if there were any freak accidents or if something was suspicious. She would report it to camp security, who was patrolling the area at that time. She had nothing to worry about. Perhaps she was just being a little bit paranoid. She nosedived into the water, and after a few minutes, she rose back up, running her fingers through her hair and exhaling sharply. And once her vision came back to, wiping the water from her eyes, she looked around. She was the only one out here. Clementine just continued on swimming. Things were very calm and cool for a while, but then something very, very strange happened. A mysterious mist rolled in from the woods suddenly, and it blinded Clementine. There was an odd figure floating above the water just a few inches and it was 5 feet away from Clementine. Clementine blinked. Wasn't sure what she was seeing. Maybe it was just her imagination. The figure looked to be about 9 feet tall. It wore a white, torn nightgown, and it seemed to have long, snow-white hair. But it had no eyes. Just a mouth that was sort of just gaping open wide, letting out this horrible shriek. Clementine covered her ears. The shriek was so loud that it even scared some of the birds that were perched on their branches. But Clementine couldn't move. She was a bit paralyzed with fear and confusion. She wasn't sure what to do, and she glanced around again at her surroundings. Where was security? How could they not have heard this awful sound? Clementine, after a moment or two of standing stock still, absolutely stunned by what she just saw, the girl quickly headed back to the dock, ascending the ladder and crawling on her hands and knees before rising and placing her sandals back on her feet. She then rushed across the sandy, rocky shore all the way back to her cabin, running as fast as her legs could carry her, her lungs nearly on fire, her heart pounding in her chest. She was definitely terrified. And perhaps maybe a couple of her new bunkmates, who had just recently had become very good friends of hers at camp, might be able to provide her with some insight. Clementine eventually staggered up the front steps, reaching the front door of her cabin, whom she shared with some other girls. Aggie, Nicole, Mei Ling, and Renee. Clementine was fiddling with her keys, trying to unlock the door, but she kept averting her eyes as she had looked back towards the lake, afraid that perhaps something or someone was following her. But fortunately, Aggie quickly answered the door, and she looked concerned, tilting her head at Clementine with a rather quizzical expression. Are you okay, Clem? She asked. Did something happen?
I don't know. I guess so, maybe? I'm not sure.
Aggie felt Clementine's forehead. Oh my goodness! You're burning up! She exclaimed. I think you're coming down with a fever. Quickly, come inside. Aggie pulled Clementine inside the cabin and quickly shut the door, then bringing Clementine to her bed. You lay down. I'm gonna go get you some orange juice and a thermometer, okay? Do not go anywhere.
Oh no, seriously, that's okay, Aggie. I'm fine, really. Thank you. I'm exhausted. It's been a very long day, and I guess I'm just a bit stressed. That's all.
Aggie arched an eyebrow skeptically, but slowly nodded, conceding to Clementine's reassurance, and pushing a strand of her dyed ocean blue hair behind her left ear. Well, if you need anything, you let me know, okay? She said gently. But can you please tell me what happened? Clementine took off her baseball cap and scratched the top of her head nervously. She shifted rather uncomfortably.
I'm not so sure that you'll believe me. I don't want to, worry you or anything more than I already have.
Aggie sat down beside Clementine and took her hand in hers. Hey, it's okay. You can talk to me, she said reassuringly. Now what's up? Was it Darcy Mitchell? Did she do something to frighten you?
Well, she and I did have a bit of an altercation at the mess hall earlier.
I was there, said Aggie. Just for a short time. There's actually a little library here at the camp, and I was just checking out some books, and I just happened to stop by, and well, I would have stepped in, but it really was none of my business. Now, I'm a little surprised that you decided to swim after dark anyway. Not a lot of kids are brave enough to do that, especially after, well... Anyway, never mind. It's nothing.
What is it, Aggie? Come on, tell me. I really want to know.
How much do you know about the history of Camp Carnegie? Asked Aggie.
My brother and I are relatively new, so I have to say that I don't know hardly much of anything in regarding its history.
Aggie had gotten up and walked over to the oak desk that was nestled right in front of their window. Looking out, she saw an old wooden bridge that was some distance away, that was covered with some mist that was still rolling in from the woods. It captivated her, but at the same time, it was a bit unsettling. Aggie opened the top drawer, and with her left hand, she reaches in and slowly pulls out a scrapbook. She then grabbed a chair, turning it to its backside facing Clementine. Then Aggie sat down, staring into Clementine's eyes, a mixture of fear and reluctance. Her eyes are darting from side to side as she leaned forward, and then, straightening her posture, she flips the book open to the first page, while occasionally glancing up at Clementine. The year was 1983, she began. There lived a mean, miserable old codger named Aaron McGrimley. Mr. Aaron McGrimley came from a very long line of fishermen and gold miners. His story begins very tragically. At just the age of 3, he loses his mother to polio, and his lazy bum father is left to raise him for the next 12 years. Now, his father, reputably, was known to frequently be the town idiot, a hermit who always got drunk and would gamble away all of Aaron's earnings. Aaron was the only one who bent over backwards, trying to put bread on the table to support them. He had to drop out of school, no matter how big the job was. Aaron did it so that him and his father wouldn't starve to death. Their house wasn't properly insulated. They didn't have, good sleeping arrangements. They practically had to sleep on the floor. And let alone they couldn't even afford his mother's medical treatments or doing blood tests or even pay for funeral costs. It was a very, very, very difficult adjustment, having to be the one trying to carry the weight, the burdens that Aaron was going to have to deal with by himself, because his father couldn't do squat. Aaron managed to keep the whole thing a secret from his father. And then, one winter, Aaron returned home from doing milk deliveries. And he went to his room and found the whole place trashed. His mother's journal was gone. And then he walked back in the living room to find that his father had burned his mother's journal and was holding the will and testament and the letter in his hand. There was a huge physical altercation. And Aaron, out of a blind rage, actually took the shovel that he had leaned up against the door frame of the entry to the house and had hit his father in the head, knocking his father out cold. The blunt force of the shovel, it had such a strong impact that it put his father in a comatose state. But something in Aaron changed drastically. It was as though something possessed him to do the most unspeakable thing. Aaron bludgeoned his father 5 or 6 more times with the shovel, till his father's face became mutilated and just grotesque, unrecognizable, just the most horrific sight that would reduce a blind man to tears. Everyone steered clear of the property. But after maybe a week or so, people started talking about having not seen Aaron's dad for quite some time. He had some bar buddies that were waiting on him for a game of poker, but he never showed up. So they enlisted the help of law enforcement to get to the bottom of this. As it still exists today, as it was back then, that house is in a very secluded area where there weren't other children nearby. There was only one sure way of getting onto Aaron's property, and that was by boat. The police had to park their boat by the bridge and walk the last 2 miles. After crossing through the bridge to get all the way to the other side, there were quite a few issues in trying to convict Aaron of murdering his father. Number 1, Aaron's dad's remains were never recovered. Aaron most likely had chopped up his dad into bits and disposed of the pieces, probably dumping them over a ravine or feeding them to wolves or something. And also, the murder weapon was not in the house or anywhere on the property, being the shovel that was used. Even though Aaron was acting a bit dodgy and defensive and really timid with the police, he was very adamant about his innocence. So, after several attempts of trying to even get a confession, the police gave up and they had to just close the case altogether. But there was a detective that was so determined to get Aaron just to admit what he did. The detective, I can't quite remember his name, but he's still alive today. He was so sure that Aaron was the killer. And he just became so obsessed with trying to uncover the truth. And him and Aaron had quite a few run-ins for the last probably 6 to 12 months, following an entire year of harassment in which the detective would always come by Aaron's property and just keep interrogating him. And, well, Aaron practically filed a restraining order against the detective. And ever since then, the detective has never set foot on the property, even after, well, Aaron died. Nobody really knows what happened to Aaron McGrimley. His death remains a mystery to this day, as well as his father's murder. But people nowadays still believe that Aaron killed his father. And ever since Mrs. Barbara bought this land and constructed the camp, since its very first opening, she was just in her 20s. And very soon after the grand opening of Camp Carnegie, some kids went missing when they went swimming in Lake McGrimley. Now, it's speculated that the shoes of children were found floating in the lake, but the bodies of the children, there was no sign of them. Now, it is rumored that Barbara Carnegie, she was trying to cover up these supposed disappearances or alleged homicides. And so no incident reports were filed, and she would invent these stories that these children were just sent back home to their families. There has been a lot of defamation cases, and she would force the families into staying silent because Mrs. Barbara cared more about how it affected her image, because she had high-paying clients from very prestigious business people. One prime example being Darcy Mitchell's dad. I do not blame the parents one bit for being frustrated, because Miss Barb had shown very strange behavior, very nonchalant, unsympathetic, very unapologetic demeanor that drew a lot of suspicion to her. But nobody could really prove that she physically had any role in the disappearance of the children, even though it was evident to the parents that she was negligent and seemed only interested in lining her pockets with cash. The little people who didn't make as much money, who weren't prestigious, and couldn't contribute to the camp financially, weren't worth a moment of her time. So they just gave up after her. For so long, defeated. Clementine was dumbstruck. Why would Barbara Carnegie not care at all about even the remote possibility that children went missing in this area and were victims of drowning, even if it was an accident? Why wouldn't she not take responsibility for that? Was money really all she cared about? Alright everyone, I'm going to leave this video here. A lot of time and effort has gone into editing and recording time for this second story in my Spooked series. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it and you will like and subscribe to show your support. So please hit that notification bell to stay tuned for more juicy content. I love you all to the tomb and back, and I hope you all had a wonderful Halloween. So remember to keep your windows barred shut and curtains drawn, your doors locked tight, and to always look underneath your bed before you go to sleep. I'm FandomTraveller87, and thank you again for listening. I would really appreciate you watching this video all the way through if possible. Also, guys, if you could, please comment down below to share your thoughts on this story. A lot of energy goes into these projects. So, a thumbs up, a heart, a nice comment would be fantastic. But if you have any feedback at all, or if you have just any sort of thing that you want to share with me, or at least how your day's going, or what you like about this channel, I would love to see your comment. So feel free to share, okay? Alright. I'm FandomTraveller87, and thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with everything. I love you all. Until next time, bye!